We know this Atlanta Braves team has World Series aspirations, but what are some of the biggest keys in order for them to accomplish that goal? I'll give you those keys today, including urgency at the top of that list. We'll discuss that and more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you check out some of my written work over at BravesToday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. And please, if you are new and watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 10K by opening day. We're almost 2 weeks away, and we still need a little bit over 500 subscribers. So if you haven't already, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. If you already have, you can hit that thumbs up button so other people can see the show and hopefully join our community here at Locked On Braves. But thank you so much for all your support. All those listening on the audio version as well, I thank you so very much for your support here at Locked On Braves. Do a lot of these live during the offseason like this one is. I see Mike Rittenhauer out there, Brad Dixon, Joseph Greenwell, Rich out there, Sean Finley, Alan Daniel as well. Thank you so much. Brandon Gandy, Brian Willits, Jeffrey Humphreys, all with me live right now. Thank you so much for joining me here today. We are going to talk about the biggest keys for the Braves to win the World Series in 2024. If these things happen, I feel very confident that the Braves will win the World Series this season. We'll talk about that on today's episode. Before we do, though, I want to let you know this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. You can do that today over on prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB. So let's talk about what is the goal for pretty much every team going into a season, and that's winning a World Series. But for this Braves team, it's not just a goal, it is an expectation. And we've heard that a lot throughout this offseason, spring training, certainly, even going back to FanFest, you heard it right there. This is a World Series or bust type of roster. The roster that Alex Anthopoulos has built, it is built to win now, and it is built to win another World Series, the second World Series in 4 years. That would be a huge accomplishment, especially in today's game where it's even harder to win a World Series. This team has the capability of doing that and getting it done. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's start with what needs to happen in the regular season, because I don't want to just glaze past the regular season like it's a foregone conclusion that this Braves team will get to the postseason. Although it'd be highly disappointing if this roster, this collection of talent, is not able to get to the postseason again, especially in today's format where nearly half the league is at least getting in at this point. We won't get into all that. I'll let that go for now. But 87 wins feels like a pretty safe amount to get into the postseason, to at least get one of those wild card spots. Last year, it only took 84 wins for two of those teams to get into the postseason. Last two wildcard spots last year from the Marlins and the Diamondbacks were 84 wins, and one of those teams went to the World Series. But 87 feels like a pretty safe number that's going to get you into the dance. It's going to get you into the postseason. 88 wins is the fewest they've won over this 6-year stretch, not counting the COVID year where they were on pace to win over 90 games. And that year where they won only 88 games, that is the year they won it all, because, hey, that's baseball. Not the 101, not the 104 win season. It was the 88 win season when they went on to win it all. So for them, in my mind, not to win at least 90 games this year, things will have had to have gone disastrously wrong for this team. As Jeffrey Humphreys says, everyone needs to stay healthy. I would even say most of the team needs to stay healthy. Not everyone's going to stay healthy, but this Braves lineup is so deep. The rotation, the bullpen is so deep. It could withstand a couple of injuries and still be a 87-win team. For the Braves not to win 87 or more games, there would have to be several key players miss a lot of time or be out for the entire year. It would take several key injuries to key players. And it would also take, in conjunction with that, a couple of players who have bad years. Let's say Marcell Ozuna regresses a lot. And I hate to keep picking on him, but it was surprising, to say the least, to see the season that he had last year after what he did the 2 years prior. And I've talked about the fact that those numbers are justified. It was not a fluky season. You go and look at the metrics, it was very justified in what he was able to do. But let's just say, he slides back a little bit, and I expect him to anyway. It's a 40 home run season. Wouldn't be surprised if he's more closer to 30. Let's say he slides back. A couple of key players get injured. I don't even want to say it because I don't want to put that in the universe right now. Especially in the starting rotation, and you're having to rely on a young A.J. Smith-Shawver, a young Hurston Waldrop. You're having to rely on a Darius Vines to give you, double-digit starts. Then I start to worry about this team a little bit. But I think them more than anybody else, they could sustain a couple of huge injuries and some players taking a step back or two, and they'd still have a chance to win 87 games this year. That's how confident I am in this team. Hopefully I'm not too overconfident. But that's what I think it would take for this team not to reach the postseason. For them to reach the postseason, it is, as Jeffrey Humphrey says, they just need to stay healthy. If they continue to, or if they do just stay healthy and this roster plays to its potential, they're going to win 90 plus games and get into the postseason. And just overall, for them to get to 90 wins, even if everybody's healthy, they just need to continue to lean heavily on that offense. Hope that they get some good contributions from their starters, stay healthy there, and the bullpen as well. But I think the key to them winning 90 plus games again, it's relying on what should be the best offense in all of baseball once again. Now the question becomes, how important is it to win the division and get a top 2 seed? I know we've talked about this throughout the offseason a little bit. As much as I don't like the current format, and I do think while there is obviously the huge downside of going into a wild card series, having a couple of bad games, and your postseason is over just like that, I do think it is an advantage to the team who is able to survive that and come out of the wild card series. That's just, it's a 2-year sample size, but it's been pretty evident that the team coming out of that wild card series comes in with a lot of momentum. And as much as I don't like the format, it's still the smart play. You get home field and you get to line up your pitching. Those are pretty big advantages going into that NLDS. The thing that's really hurt the Braves the last 2 years, other than some injuries in the rotation, is just the offense hasn't been able to get going yet. And we'll talk about that more later. I will say, though, as much as I still want them to win the division, you hear everybody talking about winning the division, I'm not going to get hung up on it this year. If the Phillies get hot and they take off, and, they're up 4 or 5 games late, and the Braves are pretty much, cruising to one of the top 2 wild card spots, especially that top wild card spot seems to be a really good place. I'm not going to get hung up if the Braves don't win the division. It's not that big of a deal to me anymore. And that's sad to say as somebody who, is a fan of 162 over the postseason. It just doesn't mean as much to me anymore. Yeah, I want them to win it. I'd love them to win it. I don't want to see the Braves go all out to win the division like they did in 2022. And in the meantime, exhaust all their players so that they have nothing left going into the postseason. I would rather see them, if the Phillies are 4 or 5 games ahead going into September and you're looking pretty good for one of those wild card spots, I would rather see them play it safe down the stretch, keep their starting rotation healthy, and start lining them up for the postseason, kind of like what the Phillies got to do last year after the Braves clinched so early. I would almost rather see them do that than go all out. Maybe try to pitch somebody on short rest to win a big series against the Phillies. I'd almost rather see them just play it conservatively and rest everybody and get them ready for the postseason. If you are just postseason World Series focused, as I know a lot of you are. But I'm with you, Brad. I want 7 straight division titles. I want that to happen. It's just not nearly as important to me right now as it has been in the past because of this playoff format. But all the talk from Snitker, everybody in camp, They are going for the division. They're going to try to win it 7 straight years in a row. I want them to win it 7 straight years in a row, but more so, you just want to be healthy and fresh and ready for the postseason. And that's why the obvious big key, the first one I'll mention here, is health. That's pretty obvious, but for this team, that's really it. Again, as I said, if everybody stays healthy, produces just career level norms, doesn't have to go even be above and beyond what they've done, just produce like they have normally over their careers, this is still the best team in baseball. And they're going to easily win 90 plus games and get into the postseason and have a chance to win the World Series. But I think particularly health in the starting rotation. And this is more of a concern when it comes postseason time, which is why I talked about making sure that your starters are ready at the end of the season and doing what you can to keep them fresh. The past 2 postseasons, we've gone into that NLDS series with 2 pitchers either banged up or not available. You don't want to have that this year. You would love to have a postseason where you go into it and Strider, Fried, Sale, Morton are all ready to go. And look, starting pitching isn't the reason necessarily they lost. Last year's NLDS, it was more on the offense, but still, you'd feel much better if you have those 4 guys ready to go from the jump in the postseason. So health, certainly one of the top priorities and keys for the Braves to win a World Series, particularly starting rotation health. But there is, in my mind, what I think could be the biggest key of all, and that is urgency for the Atlanta Braves once it comes postseason time. We'll discuss that here next. Conference tournaments are here, which means the biggest moments in college basketball are getting closer. Be a part of the action on PrizePicks for both men's and women's college basketball. PrizePicks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays alive. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. You go and look over there as well. They have spring training over and unders on games if you want to get in on that action. And you can bet on higher or lower on Spencer Strider strikeouts, his next turn through the rotation. You can do that over on PrizePicks. And it's really just that simple. All you do is you go in there, you pick 2 to 6 players or groups of players. If you want to do a combination of a Strider and an Acuna, something like that, they have that over on PrizePicks. But you pick 2 to 6 of them, and you pick higher or lower on stats like points, blocks, or assists. If you're doing basketball, or obviously hits, strikeouts, home runs. If you're doing baseball, it really is that simple. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy at PrizePicks. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Tomorrow, we will have a conversation with Grant McCauley that I've already recorded. Good talk about what's happening down in camp for the Braves. And then on Thursday, I'll give you my opening day roster predictions, as we're 2 weeks away from opening day at that point. And then obviously our mailbag episode coming up on Friday. So be looking out for that the rest of the week here at Locked On Braves. Let's get back into our keys, though, for winning a World Series. And as I said before the break, I think for me, the biggest key once it comes postseason time is urgency. You look at this Braves team, and it is certainly built for 162. You look at the depth that they have in the lineup. They can deal with an Ozzie Albies being out for a couple of weeks. They have that ability to withstand that type of injury, that type of loss that's going to happen throughout a season. Same for the rotation. I mean, last year they pitched most of the year without a Kyle Wright, without Max Fried, and still won 104 games because the offense was the best we've ever seen. This team has a workman's-like attitude. And I mean that in the best way possible. And I saw this definition. It's a standard of expected, or a standard that has become expected of professionals. And that is exactly what this Braves team is. They come in every day, they do their job to the best of their ability, and that is perfect for the regular season where there are so many ups and downs. This team does not let that bother them. They stay even keel all the way throughout, knowing that at the end of the day, their hard work will speak for itself over 162. And that is exactly what we've seen the last 2 days or the last 2 years. But in the postseason, it's do or die. You cannot have that same mentality come postseason time. You have to be ready to go from the jump. There is no easing into it, especially when you're coming into a 5-game series against a team that's already hot, a team that's already in that postseason mentality. You got to find a way to have that intensity from the very first pitch. And I think a lack of urgency from the team in general has really hurt them the last 2 postseasons. I don't doubt there's a huge desire for that team to win, but you cannot take that same mentality you have over 162 where it's come in, do my work to the best of my ability, and know that over 162 things are going to work out. In the postseason, it's totally different. Every pitch is magnified. Every out is magnified. Every hit is magnified. Every base runner is magnified in the postseason. And I don't know that this team has had that urgency the last 2 postseasons that we've seen. Obviously, they know how to do it. A lot of these players were on the 2021 team and had that. But that is the one thing for me I think it's going to take for this team from the very jump, from game 1. You know, whether they're in the wild card series, whether they get the bye, they're in the NLDS, from the get-go, they have to show that urgency. And this goes down to Brian Snitker as well. There has to be more urgency in the decision-making. Again, pitch to pitch, batter to batter, you need to be prepared. Yes, Bryce Elder looked outstanding that first time through the order against the Phillies. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have somebody up and ready to go in case that doesn't happen the second time through the order. There has to be more of a sense of urgency in these games from the very beginning. It is literally do or die, especially in a 4-game series. You got to be ready to go from the jump. And it's good to hear that mentality that the Braves have had coming into spring training. You know, they obviously seem focused. They know they haven't gotten it done the last 2 years. But in my mind, the number one key for the Braves winning in the postseason is just showing a little bit more urgency and finding a way. And I don't know the answer, but finding a way to have that postseason mentality, adrenaline from the jump. Because that other team's coming in hot. They are ready to go. You have to match that from the very, very beginning. Now, I also have to mention some of my other keys. Obviously, Chris Sale, who I talked about last week as my X factor. I have to mention him. He brings that fire. He brings that mentality, but you also have to be healthy and you have to be effective and you got to be part of the team for that to be meaningful. And hopefully that's the case for Chris Sale. He also needs to be that difference maker in the 3 spot in the rotation, whether that's matching up with the team's number 3 or if they are in the NLDS and get the bye, being able to match up with the team's 1 or 2. Now, the Braves have to go through the wild card and they don't use a Chris Sale, then he's possibly starting game 1 of that NLDS. So Chris Sale, I think in that 3rd spot in the rotation can be a huge difference maker. I've kind of touched on this already, but one of my other keys is figuring out how to get the offense going on track after 5 days, assuming they win the division, they get one of the top 2 seeds and get a bye. Got to find a way to get the bats hot. I don't know the answer. I don't know that anybody does. And I thought last year they did the best they could having simulated games, but you can't replicate that postseason environment. But finding some way during those 5 days off, again, assuming that they win the division and get the bye, finding a way to keep the batters locked in during that time. Again, if you have an answer, please send it in to Brian Snitker. I don't know that anybody does, but somebody has to figure that out. I think another key is pacing yourself in the regular season. I know position players don't want to take days off, but depending on how things play out, what the standings look like, I think some guys need to get some days off here or there, if nothing else, than to give them more practice at knowing how to come back after a day off of not doing anything or not having competitive at-bats. And I know there's off days throughout the season, all-star break, all of that, where they can get that experience. But I think they do need to take some days off here or there. and keep them fresh and ready to go for the postseason. This is more of a pitching side of things. And they've done a good job about this in the past for looking for opportunities where they could push a guy back a start, or they could give a guy an extra day of rest. They typically do a good job of that throughout the season. I think there needs to be more of that. I think you need to have times where you skip Chris Sale a turn through the rotation and call up an AJ Smith-Shawver or Darius Fines to start against a struggling offense. I think there needs to be more of that throughout the year to limit some of the innings and workload of your main starters in an effort to try to keep them healthy for the postseason. With this team, which again should win a lot of games if they stay healthy, I think you're afforded that opportunity to kind of pick some spots where you give some guys extra rest. You can't always time it, but one of the biggest keys to winning this World Series winning a World Series is having your big starters ready for the postseason. And again, it wasn't their fault last year, although you could say Game 3 not having Charlie Morton ready. But if the offense is going to struggle out of the gate, it's going to take them some time to get going. If you have the arms on the mound healthy in the rotation to hold down the other team's offense, to give your offense a chance, that could certainly help the Braves get past these first round woes that they've been having. So those are my biggest keys for the Atlanta Braves this year in winning, not just getting to the postseason, but getting there and winning the World Series. I think, obviously, other than health, a sense of urgency for the team once they get to the postseason is really key. I asked you on Twitter what some of your biggest keys were. Kaz Buckeye says, luck in a small sample size, more urgency from Snit and the managers, having fun in the playoffs like they do in the regular season and blocking out some of the noise. Hayden Harris talked about Chris Sale. Kirby D said more proactive manager instead of reactive. We talked about that one. Kev, hitting the ball in the playoffs. There's a thought. They should definitely try to figure that out. Jordan Griffey says, figuring out how to have an offense after 5 off days going into the DS and a fiery leader. I would certainly agree with that. Michael Tursky says, Tua, Fried, Morton, or Sale have to be healthy and pitching well when the playoffs start. Herman says, starting pitching rotation. Luke M, getting hot and staying hot during the playoffs. And that's really the key. And we know that it's whoever's hot at the right time. We saw it in 2021 with the Braves. But you can't always control that, but you can certainly try your best to make sure that you have everybody healthy and ready to go at the right time. Teej says not playing the Phillies. I disagree. I hope the Braves get the Phillies, and I hope that they can take them down and get that monkey off their back, kind of like they did with the Dodgers in 2021 in the NLCS. I hope the Braves get that chance again against the Phillies and can take them down this time. Johnny Elrod says Charlie Morton and Chris Sale dominant postseasons. That would certainly be huge from your 3 and 4 spots in the rotation, assuming everybody is healthy. So thanks for submitting some of those responses. And a lot of those kind of coincide with some of the keys that I talked about as well. Next, we'll discuss everything happening on Tuesday in camp, including Ronaldo Lopez's latest outing in his bid to be the Braves' 5th starter. We'll talk about all of that here next. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV Stick, which I have here at home. And you can plug those right into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or March Madness coming up, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. So you want to see more Locked On Braves or maybe just an easier way to access it, you can do it with the Fire TV channels. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, whether that be March Madness, NBA, or MLB, and lots more, not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. I enjoy some cooking videos every now and then. You can get that over when the Fire TV's channels. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Absolutely trust me on this, as you just heard mine go off in the background. You can do so over at Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Want to remind you again that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now It's also available on the Amazon Fire TV app and the free Fire TV channels app. So make sure you check that out today. More great Locked On coverage of all your favorite sports. Let's get into what happened on Tuesday. The Braves lost to the Pirates 5-1. Not much offense there. Not many of the Braves regulars in the lineup sent over there. But Ronaldo Lopez got the start on the mound. He gave up one run. First batter of the game that he faced, a solo shot by O'Neal Cruz. If you're not taking O'Neal Cruz in your drafts, you may want to. Kid could be in for a big year. But Lopez went on to give up 3 hits, 3 walks, and had 2 strikeouts in 3 2/3 innings. Certainly not his cleanest outing of spring training. He walked 3 batters in the second inning where he could not find it, but didn't give up a run thanks to a great pickoff by Sean Murphy, who needs to be behind the plate almost all the time. Now, certainly 2 out of 3 games, he needs to be back there. Sean Murphy is a defensive asset. He showed that off on Tuesday. Velocity was down for Ronaldo Lopez, maxed out the fastball at 95.7, averaged 94.2. Don't love that. It is spring training, and he is trying to get stretched out. And obviously, we know it's not going to be 97, 98, touching or approaching triple digits like he was as a reliever, but you still would like to see him averaging more 96, 95, 97. You'd like to see more of that even as a starter. I talked about this at the beginning of spring training. What I wanted to see from Lopez is when he goes deeper into outings, can he still have that big velocity that makes a huge difference, obviously, in how successful he can be. Didn't really get to see that on Tuesday, so certainly something to keep in mind going into his next outing. He did get 5 whiffs on 27 swings. Joe Jimenez pitched late in the game, pitched an inning and a third, gave up a solo home run as well after he came back out for his second inning of work, but otherwise, pretty good outing from him. His velocity was also down a bit from last year, averaged just 93.1 mile per hour on the fastball. So not sure what was going on there Tuesday. Both pitchers pretty down significantly with the velocity. It is spring training. They're getting worked back up. So nothing too concerning, but thought I would mention it. I did mention not many regulars in the lineup. Jared Kelenic was in there, though. He went 0 for 3, 2 more ground balls to the pool side. I'm probably going to write up an article on this for Braves today, talking about his tendency to pull balls on the ground and what he needs to do to correct that. Obviously not hit ground balls to the right, to the pool side. But all 3 balls he put in play were hard hit. So that is certainly a positive, including a long fly out in the second inning that he just missed getting out of there. So hopefully for some good signs for Kelenic. I put out a tweet about this and how he is so pool happy. It is a lot of ground balls. I didn't mean that necessarily to be so much of a negative tweet. Reference to Jason Hayward, who did that a lot. And Jason Hayward also had really good offensive years for the Braves. Go look up those years for Jason Hayward offensively. You're talking about a 120, 115 WRC plus type of seasons. So you can be successful with that. But I just think there's an adjustment there that hopefully needs to be made as you're looking at, him working with Kevin Seitzer and the Braves coaching staff to get some more launch on those baseballs. And you start to see that, I think you can really see Jared Kelenic take off and eliminate some of those easy ground balls to the right side. So I wanted to point it out just because if he can get that corrected, I think you're talking about somebody who could have a big year for the Braves. You had Luis Guillorme at shortstop, so that's good to see him in there and his versatility, being able to handle that position. And then I want to mention Nacho Alvarez. He was at third base. He's been at third base his last few games that he's played in. He was also reassigned after the game along with Luke Waddell and Luis Liberato to minor league camp as the Braves continue to trim down their roster. And as things stand here on Tuesday, we are 16 days away from opening day. Cannot wait. Just again, a little over 2 weeks away. Travis d'Arnaud has worn the number 16 since 2020. Brian McCann wore it before him in 2019 and also wore it from 2005 to 2013 with the Braves. Charlie Clutch wore it in 2018. Mark DeRosa, one of my favorite Braves, wore it from 2001 to 2004. Reggie Sanders wore it for a year in 2000. Mike Mordecai, a good childhood name, wore it from 1995 to 1997. Did you know Chipper Jones wore the number 16 for his 8-game appearance in 1993? And then Sandy Alomar Sr. wore it for the Braves starting with Milwaukee in 1964 and through 1966. So those are your number 16s as we are just 16 days away from opening day. Thanks to everybody who joined today's podcast. Want to remind you again, tomorrow we'll have a conversation with Grant McCauley, catching on everything he saw down in spring training. On Thursday, I'll give you my opening day roster predictions, and then Friday we'll have our mailbag podcast. Thanks to Miguel, Nicholas, Argenis, Cody, Sean, Jeffrey Humphreys, and others who have made it to the end of this podcast. See you, Tina Churchwell, out there. Nicholas C., again, thank you so much. Wynn Gracer, Brian McGrath, T-Raj, Anthony, thank you so much for joining me and making it to the end of this podcast. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 3K by opening day. You can help me get there as well by hitting the thumbs up button on this video, telling a friend, letting them know we're getting geared up for the season, and there's no better way to get geared up and ready for the Braves' upcoming season than listening to Locked On Braves. So hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, all the good things to support us here at Locked On Braves. You're listening on the audio version. Make sure you leave me a 5-star review. Follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves for your chance to be a part of the podcast like many of you were today. And thank you so much for your support here at Locked On Braves. So one more time, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.